Hi, welcome back to this very short video. Another revisit to conflict. You know, when we were in winter, we talked a little bit about conflict, and it really is the thread that weaves amongst all relationships, is how we manage conflict. So it's important that we look at it from multiple different angles. And in this video, we're going to talk about conflict in terms of the deconstruction of what our conflicts are. So as you might remember me saying, Dr. John Gottman has something in Seattle called the Love Lab, where he and his team have studied thousands of couples in all stages of relationships. And they have really boiled down most relationship conflicts to be this very scientific formula. One of the things that he found that I find so fascinating is we have this idea about conflict that if we could just stop fighting, we would be great. But it doesn't actually work that way, because you are a grown person with all of your hopes and dreams and experiences connecting with another person, and they have their hopes and dreams and experiences, and you really are coming together as two people interacting in a million different ways. So I know some people get married and the priest might ask, you know, these two people shall become one. If anybody, has any reason why these two should not become one, please speak now or forever hold your peace. And that's actually not true. That's actually not how it goes. It isn't two becomes one, right? We don't actually lose ourselves when we marry somebody else. But what we do have is plenty of opportunities to identify where our conflict places are. We have many points of conflict, and some of them, as we talked about before, are like one and dones, right? Like conflict that just happens and needs to be solved. And there's a whole pocket of conflict that never gets solved. 69% of conflicts do not get solved. Like if you just think about the number of times you argue with your spouse about the same things and you think, what is wrong with us? Why can't we just figure this out? Well, there's actually science behind the unfigure-outable, right? The unsolvable conflicts. The point is not to get your relationship to a space where there is no conflict. Because what that actually means is one person is not being true, is not being honest, is not being upfront with what's going on with them. So we want conflict to be healthy and strong and growth focused. We don't want it to be destructive. And one way we get to a place of knowing how to manage and navigate our conflict is to understand our conflict to begin with. So we have identified on this slide a number of different kinds of conflict. You might have a values conflict. So for example, this comes up in politics. One person believes one set of political ideals, one person believes a different set of political ideals. In a values conflict, it is extremely hard to find alignment and agreement because it goes to who we are in our most basic sense, in our most core values. So if you have somebody who is a very huge proponent of some of the social hot button issues, abortion, gun rights, immigration, like just some of these big sweeping political hot topics, for a reason hot topics, you have someone who is on one side of those issues. If your partner is on the opposite side of that issue, on any of those issues, that is a values conflict. And those are the hardest to mitigate. Most couples actually do not speak about those things. If something comes up, they say, no, I will talk to my sister, my girlfriend, my friend, my buddy at the gym, my person at work, my dog groomer. I will not talk to my spouse about this. I will not talk to my love partner because our values do not align. Now, in a healthy relationship, most of your values should align, and we will do a values exercise later on. But if you have a values conflict, it's very hard to get any kind of compromise or win-win because you're just on two polar opposite sides of the issue. And we will talk about values when we get to that section, but this is one source of conflict. So you might decide, we can't solve this right now. We might never solve this. This might be one of our perpetual conflict issues. We are choosing not to have conflict over this. So if we agree on, we are both going to donate $100, we don't decide where that $100 that each of us gets to donate to, because it might actually be to a cause that goes against somebody's values. And that could just start a whole other conflict, right? So you get $100 to donate to whoever you want. I will donate my $100 to whoever I want, and we don't discuss. And that is what some couples do when you have values conflicts. Another conflict is interpersonal conflict. So that is really at the core level of your relationships, right? And what happens in those interpersonal, intimate moments. There's conflict and misunderstandings in those spaces. There could be circumstantial conflicts, so things outside of your control, but still push you to winter. They still could trigger in you a response or reaction from your reptilian brain, even though intellectually you know this is outside of my partner's purview, this is outside of their control. The circumstances still happen and create a conflict for you. You might have a data conflict, which is straight up analysis. This happens sometimes in finances, right? When couples are talking about money, oftentimes there might be data conflict because how do you categorize essential spending? Is it the manicure and the massage, or is it just, ramen noodles and, canned beans? What's essential, right? We have to define these things. There could be task conflicts. And this would really be showing up in like housework and household chores, that there's conflict around who has to do what. And is it this person's responsibility or that person's responsibility? Or why am I always saddled with the cooking and the cleaning? Why are you always the lucky one to, take care of the garden and rake the leaves, right? So there could be conflict around often division of labor or really any kind of tasks that could come between a couple. And the last part is the perpetual conflict, right? This is the conflict that really isn't going anywhere. And sometimes it could be a values conflict, like, two people being on opposite sides of the abortion issue or gun rights or immigration or, one of these kinds of topics. But it doesn't always have to be these massive conflicts. Sometimes it could be, what kind of movies that we like to watch, or morning owls versus night owls, or morning birds versus night owls, and just differences in rhythms. That can go on your whole life, right? Perpetual conflicts don't only happen in the big sweeping moments. They could also happen in very small things, like how somebody makes their coffee, or how they fold laundry or load a dishwasher. And we've all seen memes online about, you let your spouse, load the dishwasher, they walk away and you go and fix it all, right? That could be a conflict for some relationships where there's constant battles around something that's never going to be solved. So think about your conflicts. Think about the last 5, 10, 15 conflicts over the last year you've had with your partner. Where do they typically fall, right? Is it a data conflict where you talk about an article that you read and your partner starts challenging you on the validity of the research or the statistics, or, that article is leading you astray? And so you start arguing over, like oil prices in the Middle East, which have nothing to do with anything in your life, but you're fighting over intellectual superiority, right? And being right. That could be a data conflict that you guys keep finding yourself in these types of conflicts. That's a data conflict. So what can you do to mitigate those conflicts when they come up, right? How can you phrase those differently? Or how can you be open to say, oh yeah, actually, I didn't think about it that way. That's a really good point. The article doesn't say anything about that, but it would be a more balanced article if they did talk about that point of view, that's totally right, right? Or no, I think, with all of this research, it really shows that that's an antiquated, that's an outdated point of view. The research has showed new things have come down the pipe, so that really isn't going to be relevant anymore. And in 5 years, we probably won't even hear about that because it really is outdated. And here's some more research, or here's another book I read, or here's a podcast I heard, right? And you have a data discussion, but it doesn't become a conflict because now you know, oh, wait a minute here. We often slide into winter over data conflicts. So how can we change the kaleidoscope of our conversation to not slide into winter? If you have task conflicts, right? If you're constantly fighting over who does what, maybe it's time for a chore chart, and you just say, we're going to sign up for stuff. Let's write down all the tasks that our household requires in a week. And we divvy it up. Now, maybe you're at a place where you can outsource some of this. Maybe you have children and they participate, or you have a roommate and that person contributes to some of the household chores. Maybe you hire somebody to come in and do the things. You have a gardener come in and do the gardening, or a housekeeper to come in and do the cleaning once a week. There's a laundress service that my girlfriend uses. That's all this person does is come in and she does 10 loads of laundry a week, washes, dries, folds, irons, and puts everything away. That is her job, to come into this family and do the laundry. She is a laundress, and she has saved the marriage because they were fighting so deep and so dirty over, no pun intended about dirty laundry, but it was just getting to the point that they were really thinking their marriage was in trouble. When they identified what their conflict was and removed it, they are so happy. They are giddy, so happy, right? So get to know your conflict, really get to know your conflict. Talk with your partner. What do you think we fight about, right? Gottman, who I will talk about many times in this course, has said that during times of conflict, the difference between families or couples that come out of conflict feeling connected and couples coming out of conflict feeling disconnected is 30 seconds of positive feedback. That's it. That's it. 30 seconds was the amount of time that couples who stayed connected in love, in spring, moving to summer, on each other's side, they had each other's backs, was 30 seconds of positive interaction during a conflict. Without those 30 seconds, that couple was well into winter and had to do a lot more work to rebuild the trust to come back to spring again. Conflict does not mean a free-for-all. It does not mean no holds barred, all weapons ready to fire. No. Conflict is a disagreement. That's it. If it is getting completely out of control, we need to start implementing some anger management techniques like timeouts. If somebody's like, I need to take a walk, the other person honors that. Okay, let's come back in half an hour. Another stat that Gottman found was that in this timeout, grown adults needed to have over 20 minutes of timeout time for their blood pressure to come back to somewhat normal levels. So if you say, I need a timeout, and you go outside and you take a couple deep breaths and you come back in, you're not ready. You're not ready. You are physiologically still in the fight, flight, or freeze mode. You are not ready. You are in the reptilian brain. 20 minutes was how long it took somebody to go calm down and come back to be able to talk in a calm and relaxed and controlled manner. They could still be angry. They could still be hurt, but they weren't behaving angry, behaving hurt, right? There's differences there. So for 30 seconds, being the difference between staying connected in a conflict and being completely disconnected and back in winter, think about the next time you are having a conflict, how you can reach out and create positive connection during the conflict. That might be, like I said, taking the time out, but it also might be, that's a really good point. I hadn't thought of that. Ooh, I like that idea. Maybe we can consider that. We should write that down, right? Some of these kinds of things, so that you are not shutting your partner down. You are not saying their ideas are dumb. You are not saying they are ridiculous and out of control and they have no clue. And no, you're not criticizing, judging, and shutting them down. You are welcoming them into a common space where positivity lives, right? So your conflicts will not get as hot when you have 30 seconds of positive interaction each time you're entering into those conversations. So have that in your mind. 30 seconds, 30 seconds. How can I reconnect? How can I give them an invitation to accept my positivity? That's a really good idea. I haven't heard that before. Where did you see that? Is there, like, did you hear that on a podcast? Or no, I saw it in an article on the newspaper, or here it is, like I'll send it to you or something, right? The whole conflict is changed. The whole thing has changed because of this 30 seconds of positivity. You have in your hands the ability to not fall back into winter when conflict arises. So now that you know where your conflict behaviors came from, how you learned them, how you practice them, what you get out of them, like who you become in conflict, you can now see, we can break down conflict into very clear channels. Identify what conflicts you and your partner typically have, and then find a way to inject positivity into those early on. As soon as you know it's happening, because it's happened before, you know, okay, now is my opportunity. I can diffuse this. I can de-escalate this. Your partner should be doing the same thing. I can diffuse this. I can de-escalate. And together contributing positive and nurturing and connection bids, your conflict kind of goes away. The heated, hot, spiraling, angry, blizzarding conflict is a thing of the past, because that's just not what conflict means to you two anymore. And that's pretty cool. So congratulations on making it through yet another way of looking at conflict. I think we have a couple more to go in this whole course. So we're not done with conflict, but we are done with the types of conflict. So now you get to think about your conflict with your partner and what that means for you. And I will see you in the next video where we are going to talk about boundaries. I'll see you then. Bye.